This is the Gospel of Jesus Christ according to St. Mark, the 9th chapter. Jesus and the disciples went on and passed through Galilee. He did not want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, "The Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him. And 3 days after being killed, he will rise again." But they did not understand what he was saying and were afraid to ask him. Then they came to Capernaum. And when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent, for on the way they had argued with one another who was the greatest. He sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." Then he took a little child and put it among them, and taking it in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. And so, you may or may not be aware that in my tradition, in the ELCA, pastors don't typically pick the readings for a Sunday. We follow something called the Revised Common Lectionary, which assigns 4 readings each Sunday that repeats in a 3-year schedule, year A, B, and C. So 3 years from now, by the church calendar, we will read these exact readings again. And I don't typically look too far ahead. I've preached around the cycle enough to kind of know when a series that'll need to be dealt with is coming up, and otherwise I'm surprised each week by what it is we'll be reading. Imagine my surprise on Tuesday when I gathered with other pastors to discuss these readings on a week when 3 of the 4 churches I serve have baptisms scheduled. And we see Jesus holding a little child and saying, "Whoever welcomes one such as these welcomes me." I mean, wow. I almost don't need to preach that. I mean, we've got an object lesson right in front of us with the children that are being baptized. Actually, I almost didn't preach it. I usually write out a script for my sermons, and now I have 1 page of notes. And right after the part telling me to discuss our lectionary, it says, "Consider sitting down. Allow that child to be the lesson Jesus gave the disciples." And maybe I will do that, maybe I won't, when there's actually a child to be baptized right after I preach. Here in this format, we don't have that object lesson, so let's at least ask the 2 questions that are on my mind about this child Jesus holds. What is the nature of a child that Jesus is talking about? And how do we welcome them? I mean, what is the nature? I hope we're not thinking specifically only of a child, as if Jesus says, "Welcome the children," but once they get old, to heck with them. And then what does it mean? What is Jesus telling the disciples about loving and welcoming another? It's the nature of a child, as I'm sure some of you have heard sermons, that they are lowly, next to worthless. Maybe in some of the ancient world, that was the way children were viewed. There's definitely a different status a child held in the ancient world than we do in our modern world. But really, the essence of the blessing that God gave to Abraham was descendants. A child was a blessing upon a blessing. Jesus didn't need to tell the Hebrew people to consider a child precious. So is it a child's dependence? I mean, the full dependence the child has on another. And yes, that is part of the nature of a child Jesus discusses, but in a few weeks we'll hear Jesus tell us that we should receive the kingdom like a child. And that's probably more applicable to think of the dependence of a child in our nature of mimicking it and receiving God's kingdom. So what is it? What is it about a child that in welcoming them becomes the welcoming of the Lord? So I look at the reading and I think, what is it that the disciples were unable to do right before Jesus tells them this? They didn't understand him, but they were afraid to ask. If you've ever been around a child of a certain age, you know that's something a child's never afraid to do. Ask. Ask the question. Oh, that favorite one, why? And you say, and they say, well, why that? And then why that? And why that? Digging deeper into the explanation of why is the world the way it is. Maybe that's what it is we are supposed to welcome about the child. The questions that look at a world that isn't the way God intends it to be. And doesn't just go quiet and learn to get along with it or accept it, but asks why. Maybe in welcoming those questions that challenge what we think must be, maybe we get a glimpse behind the door to see the Lord coming. So how is it that we welcome that? I mean, if we are told to welcome that child with those questions, with that probing curiosity, how do we do it? What is Jesus showing the disciples? And I think in our world we tend to think that you welcome one another by having no expectations placed upon them. Jesus is showing the opposite. He's been lecturing the disciples that this is going to be harder than you think. If you want to be the greatest, you're going to need to learn to serve. You're going to need to accept that we're going to a cross. You're going to have to become better than you thought you could be. Welcoming, in this instance, isn't about allowing the child to continue to be without growing. It's about seeing in them all of the potential they can grow into, placing those expectations upon them that they will become the best version of who God made them to be. Doesn't mean we force upon them the expectations to be, who we think they should grow to be. No. But we raise them, we nurture them in faith and prayer, our baptismal liturgy says. We nurture them in faith and prayer so that they learn to trust God, so that they learn how to ask the bold questions, how to probe with enough curiosity that it becomes impossible to look at the world and not see God's love. You see, if we can give that to our children, as hard as it is to place that demand upon them, that they would learn to be self-sacrificing, to see others as valid and worthy of the sacrifice. The promise is that through those child's eyes, we will see the Lord. If you welcome one such as this, you welcome me, Jesus says. May you seize the opportunities in your life to nurture in faith and prayer the probing curiosities of the children around you, so that you are given that glimpse beyond the veil of this world to the glorious kingdom that comes with or without us. God's blessings to you. Amen.